Good Yontif. Jacqueline and Isa and Ariella and Nomi join me in wishing each of you a Shana Tova. May we all be inscribed for life and for blessing. And may this new year of 5777 be a year of peace and goodness for us and for our families, for all Israel, for our nation, and for all the world. These days of awe are about so many different things: renewal, return, repentance. But they also offer us an opportunity for reflection. The High Holy Days provide this annual opportunity to think about the year that has passed, the ways that we have changed, the ways we've fallen short or perhaps even exceeded our expectations from time to time. This past May, I had a wonderful and inspiring opportunity to reflect on the passage of time. It was my 25th college reunion. Yeah, I know what some of you are thinking. Did he say college reunion? Surely he meant high school. Perhaps for those of you in the back, elementary school even. But alas and indeed, I was graduated from university in 1991, and my reunion was an opportunity to reflect on continuity and change in my school and in my classmates and in myself as well. Although the campus included new buildings and programs and even whole departments, in other ways, it felt like very little had changed. My classmates have actually held up pretty well, and so I recognized most of them. The muggy East Coast weather of late May was unfortunately just as I remembered. Yet, in other ways, student life was quite different, and in some respects, almost unrecognizable. And what has changed most radically on campus today is this: how students connect and communicate with one another and with the broader world. I was fortunate to have two special guides with me into today's college culture. My brother's son and my sister's daughter both were graduating with the class of 2016 at the very same institution. And so through the eyes of my niece, Grace, and my nephew, Jacob, I learned much about both the promise and the pitfalls of the way communication takes place on campuses today. Now, my generation was the last to graduate university without email. We didn't have cell phones or cable TV in our dorm rooms either, and we liked it, friends. We liked it. Of course, Grace and Jacob and all of their classmates have access to laptops with Wi-Fi during lectures, and their smartphones, like ours, are ubiquitous. My niece and nephew taught me about an even newer mode of communication on campuses today. It's called Yik Yak. It's a social media app that I'd never heard of before. It was launched in 2013, which means it's already out of date. Nobody's using it, I'm sure, anymore. But at the time, it was a big thing. It's an anonymous social media application that is limited to a small geographical area. Users create a discussion thread that can only be joined by others within a 5-mile radius. And the results often spiral into any number of different directions. My niece Grace told me that some students enjoy using Yik Yak during lectures in order to comment anonymously on the quality of the lesson and even, sadly, sometimes on the appearance of the lecturer. So by the way, if any of you are doing that today, just please be kind. You know, it's the Day of Atonement after all. So now, sadly but predictably, Yik Yak on some campuses has at times become a forum for hate speech, with students posting racist, sexist, and anti-Semitic comments. And on several campuses around the country, university administrators have tried somewhat unsuccessfully to ban the app. Of course, its anonymity is precisely what attracts many users to the platform. One social media expert describes the phenomenon as identity fatigue. Internet users' growing weariness with having their digital communications attached to their real-world personas and thus susceptible to public scrutiny. In the words of the founder of the company, Brooks Buffington, that's his real name, by the way, I verified it on the internet. He said, once you have an online profile, you're expected to act a certain way. People only post the best and most beautiful parts of their life on Instagram. But on Yik Yak, you can just put something out there, and if it doesn't resonate with others, it's not a reflection on you. Judging by Yik Yak's user numbers at the time and the growing popularity of other anonymous social media applications today, students increasingly wish to be able to say whatever they want without consequences. You can insult a teacher or a fellow classmate or share a racist or sexist comment without having the sentiment attached to your real-world persona, that is, yourself. No need later to scrub your Facebook or Instagram profile before a job interview. None of these statements will reflect poorly on you. But here's the thing. Our words matter. And how we use them is a reflection of what we believe, of what we value, of what we stand for, and ultimately of who we are. And we find ourselves in a moment when words are being used in ever coarser ways, even when they're not being used anonymously. In this year's heated political environment, there seems to be no minimum standard of decency. We slide lower and lower from boorish, ill-mannered behavior to a level of incivility that is unprecedented. And we ask ourselves, how should we respond to language that's being used which is demeaning to women, disabled persons, Muslims, and other minority groups? And how do we respond as a nation to language which goes far beyond lewd, to that which is misogynistic and even violent? This kind of speech should concern us greatly. And it trickles down, doesn't it? It permeates and shapes our culture, our daily lives, and even the lives of our children. It's not enough that college students are experimenting with anonymity and consequence-free speech. Just a few weeks ago, I received an email from my daughter's high school alerting parents about a new smartphone app that's called After School. It's a social media application created especially for teens that will allow them to post anonymously about one another. After a comment is posted, the student about whom the post was directed is notified and can then see what was said about him or her. It's not hard to imagine how terribly destructive a piece of technology like this might be in a middle or high school setting. If we fail to speak up, if we fail to advocate for discourse which reflects our values, to say not okay, to speech or behavior which is hateful and violent, we are helping to create a colder, meaner, coarser world, which will inevitably make us and our children colder, meaner, coarser people. Now, make no mistake, I believe deeply in a vibrant and open exchange of ideas. Professors, students, indeed all of us, should have the freedom to address challenging topics, even if it might make others feel uncomfortable in the process. And I believe it's our right, sometimes even our duty, to attack positions held by others that are at odds with our core principles. But that doesn't mean that we're permitted to abandon propriety, manners, and respect for the humanity of the other in the process. In these Yamim Noraim, in these days of awe, we think about the state of our world. We think about the state of our nation, and we think more personally about the state of our own souls. And we ask ourselves, how can we make it better? How can we improve ourselves and our communities and our world? So, how can we elevate the conversation? How can we share our perspectives honestly and openly without descending to name-calling and personal attacks? How can we exercise our right to free speech in a way that is wise, kind, and informed by our belief that all people are created in God's image. I want to share 3 lessons today from our tradition. Number 1, words make worlds. That is, words matter. Number 2, a person is a world. That is, every person matters. And 3, it can be done. That is, people can disagree, argue, stand for different things, and still be civil and respectful. In fact, they can even be friends who can help each other to grow and to be better. Lesson 1, words matter. According to our tradition, the universe is created through speech. It's right there in Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, at the very beginning. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Vayomer Elohim yehi or, vayehi or. And in our daily morning liturgy, we address God as Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam. Blessed is the one who spoke and brought the world into being. It's not just God's words that count. Our words count too in our tradition. The childhood adage that sticks and stones might break my bones, but words will never hurt me, has no place in the Jewish tradition. According to Jewish law, words can cause tangible damage to one's reputation, affect one's livelihood, and inflict emotional distress. In fact, the sages teach that embarrassing someone with our words is likened to spilling blood. It's like murder. And fully 1/4 of the Al-Chet prayer, the prayer we said just a few minutes ago, in which we beat our chests as we confess our many transgressions, fully 1/4 of those transgressions are related to speech, including most specifically, Al-Chet shechatanu lefanecha b'dibur peh, for the transgressions that we have committed by using our mouth. Al-Chet shechatanu lefanecha bilshon hara, and the transgressions that we've committed through gossip and slander. In Judaism, words have weight. They are not abstract, immaterial things. In fact, a word is called a davar in Hebrew, which means thing. Words are real. They can wound and they can heal. They can create and they can destroy. Friends, the way we talk to each other and the way we talk about each other, what we email and text and post, and how we respond or fail to respond to speech that is hateful. In all these ways, we are communicating values. We are declaring what we stand for and who we are. And Judaism doesn't know from identity fatigue. Our tradition does not glamorize the anonymous critic or the unattributed quote. And let me be perfectly clear. In our tradition, wherever you are, whatever the context, in a sanctuary, on a bus, in a locker room, whatever the setting, what we say, and how we say it is a reflection of who we are. Lesson 2, every person is a world. All people have inherent worth. The rabbis of the Mishnah ask why it is that God decided to create the world through one primordial human being, Adam. After all, God can do anything. God could have created the world fully populated. Why do it that way? And here's what the rabbis teach. Humanity was first created as one person, Adam, in order to teach you that anyone who destroys a single life is considered by Scripture to have destroyed an entire world. And anyone who saves a single life is understood by Scripture to have saved an entire world. A person. Every person is a world. Even our ideological foes. Even our political opponents. Even those whose worldviews we might find deplorable. even they, have fundamental worth. Now, this sounds a lot easier than it is. Of course, every person has fundamental worth in principle. But in practice, the guy who cut you off on the 405 on the way up here, the guy's an idiot, okay? And the lady in the express checkout aisle at Ralph's with 16 items in her cart, we all know 15 is the limit, she should really be banned from the store. She has no business shopping there. And don't get me started about those nut jobs who are supporting the candidate that I'm against. They should just go to Russia already, or Mexico, I don't care, just get them out of here. But if we take this lesson seriously, that every person is a world, well, then we have to find a way to talk to those with whom we disagree, even with those who have wronged us. And we have to do it with respect and with dignity. And we have to accept that our ideological foes are, in fact, part of our family, descendants of Adam HaRishon, our shared primordial ancestor. And friends, part of my vision for this place, for Stephen Wise Temple, is that it will be a gathering place for passionate yet civil dialogues and group conversations. The wisdom of our tradition can help us grapple with complex issues relating to morality and public policy and national politics and our beloved state of Israel. And we can do this more successfully if we truly believe that each person is a world, that every person has value. Lesson 3. It is possible. We can argue and debate and disagree in profound ways and still be respectful. Despite our differences, we can be civil and we can even be friends. The Talmud tells us of a famous dispute between the great sages Hillel and Shammai and their descendants. They debated and fought over a contentious matter for a period of 3 years. In fact, it's interesting, the Talmud never tells us what it is that they're arguing about. Perhaps the lesson is it doesn't really matter. It usually doesn't. But the debate goes on, and finally, a voice cries out from heaven, "These and these are the words of the living God. Elu ve'elu, divrei Elohim chayim hen." But the halakha, the legal ruling, follows the reasoning of Hillel. That is to say, both sides have made good points. Both sides have spoken truth. But at the end of the day, it's Hillel's argument that is accepted. But then the rabbis ask a question. If both sides have spoken the truth, if both sides have made good arguments, why privilege Hillel's argument over Shammai's? And listen to the reply. It's not about the quality of Hillel's argument. It's about Hillel's character. It's about how he and his disciples act towards their opponents. And this is how the Talmud puts it. It's because the students of Hillel were kind and gracious. They taught their own ideas as well as the ideas from the students of Shammai. In fact, they even went so far as to teach Shammai's opinions first. Not only is it possible for ideological foes to engage in discourse without killing each other or resorting to name-calling, they can even remain friends. In the 1980s, House Speaker Tip O'Neill and President Ronald Reagan were fierce ideological foes. O'Neill was an Irish Catholic from Boston, active in Democratic politics from the age of 15. Reagan was a Protestant from Illinois, who gained fame as an actor in Hollywood. After becoming a Republican at the age of 51, he served, of course, 8 years as our governor and then 8 years in the White House. O'Neill once called Reagan Herbert Hoover with a smile. And he referred to Reagan's plan to cut benefits for early retirees as a despicable and rotten thing to do. And then Reagan, in turn, accused O'Neill of liberal demagoguery. But after this particular disagreement, President Reagan phoned the Speaker of the House to clear the air. O'Neill famously replied, "Old buddy, that's politics. After 6 o'clock, we can be friends. But before 6, it's politics." More recently, Antonin Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg spent 23 years together on the United States Supreme Court, invariably opposing one another's views. In 1986, Scalia became the first justice of Italian descent on the court, a practicing Catholic and social conservative who frequently ruled against abortion rights, against affirmative action, against gun control. And in 1993, Ginsburg became our nation's second female justice, the daughter of Russian Jewish immigrants who has been one of the most consistently liberal judges on the bench. Yet not only did Scalia and Ginsburg have the utmost respect for each other professionally, they were also the best of friends. Along with their spouses, they attended opera together, they traveled the globe, and spent every New Year's Eve with one another for over 2 decades. And after Scalia died this past February, Ginsburg spoke publicly about how their disagreements made her better, how her world was richer, and how she grew as a person and as a judge because of their friendship. Now, had she decided to unfriend Antonin the moment his arguments challenged or offended her, her world and ours would have been smaller, impoverished, less. Or how about the Bushes and the Obamas? Unlikely friends, perhaps, but friends nonetheless. Just last month, we saw the beautiful image of Michelle Obama embracing George W. Bush at the dedication of the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Now, why have they become so close? After all, Democratic President Barack Obama's first victory was in no small part a repudiation of Republican President George W. Bush's entire administration. Here's how David Axelrod, one of President Obama's former advisors, understands it. President Bush was very gracious to us during the transition, he said, and he has been unfailingly gracious and respectful ever since. He recalled President Obama telling him once that the Bushes were teaching him lessons in how to be a former president. It sounds familiar, right? A deep kavod for one's political or ideological foe, a graciousness, a respect, an openness to learning from the other. Here's something that might give us hope. Just as political culture can become coarser and more disrespectful, so too can the pendulum swing the other way. And we can be part of that change as individuals and as a community. We can model civility and respect in our own behavior, even in online and social media settings. And we can demand it of others, including our elected officials and those who would seek higher office. And we can cherish and celebrate the wonderful diversity of this place. Stephen Wise Temple is the most diverse Reformed synagogue in the world. We have members and guests from all parts of our planet with different backgrounds and different ideas and different worldviews, who bring different points of view, but who share a love of Judaism, of Torah and the values embedded in it, of Israel and of community. And perhaps most important of all, we can be just a bit more humble about our own opinions, postures, stances, and worldviews. We just might be wrong some of the time, maybe even much of the time. Hillel was careful to learn and examine the arguments of his foe, so much so that he was able to teach Shammai's opinions himself. Now, this is a type of radical empathy, a deep commitment to understanding the argument, thinking, and maybe even the experience of the other. Justice Ginsburg once spoke publicly about a time when Scalia showed her his dissenting opinion in a case before she had finished writing the majority opinion. And she said, "I took this dissent, this very spicy dissent, and it absolutely ruined my weekend." She then went and made changes to her own argument as a result. This is hard to do, both in principle and in practice. It requires an open heart and an open mind. It requires humility and empathy. and the belief that the other has inherent kavod, inherent dignity. Here's one last thing that gives me hope. I wrote my niece the other day, and I asked her to share with me some of her thoughts about civil discourse. And she wrote me back a beautiful letter which included this insight into the type of empathy required to make respectful dialogue possible. She wrote, "You have to accept the fact that you can't know everything, or even most things about another person, but you must assume that their lives are as full and unknowable as your own. And therefore, they are valid and deserving of dignity, respect, and the benefit of your doubt." Friends, as we confess our many sins, as we examine our shortcomings, let's commit ourselves to a more respectful dialogue. Let's affirm the power of words themselves, and then resolve to use our words more carefully. Let's remember that every person is a world. Every person deserves to be treated with kavod, with humility, and with empathy. And let's remember that the lives and experiences and beliefs of others are indeed as full and unknowable as our own. They are deserving of dignity, respect, and the benefit of our doubts. And if we believe this, and if we live this day by day, we can build a culture in which we communicate and even disagree with mutual respect. And if we believe this and live this day by day, our communities, diverse they may be, will be more unified than ever before. And if we live this principle day by day, we will enjoy the fruits of meaningful civil discourse, whether on Facebook or Face the Nation or even face to face.